want to go out and like really do something.
I say it, I say it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked. Bamboozled.
It's a celebration, fellas.
Always do the right thing.
That's it?
That's it.
I got it. I'm gone. The way of the future. The way of the future. The way of the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to Duel of the Greats, Season 2, Episode 6, A Day in the Life, folks. We have two very, very interesting movies that we're going to be talking about this week. We will be discussing After Hours from Martin Scorcese, which is a wild movie. And then we have 25th Hour from Spike Lee, which is it's definitely not as wild as After Hours, but it's a little bit of a departure, I think, from Spike Lee. So we can those are the two movies that we're going to discuss. And now for me, this is this the first? I can't. No, it's not the first week. I can't remember. There was one other week, but anyway, I had not seen either of these two movies. Okay, before this week, and not only did I not seen these two movies, I had not seen much about these two movies. To be honest, when we
Change
were
is never easy.
putting together the weeks and the movies to pit up against each other for each week, for each show, these two we paired together essentially based on Wikipedia description, because it sounded like, okay, they're both sort of self-contained movies that take place within a one day, one night type of time frame, and involve a man and his sort of journey through that night and what it reveals to be about himself. So there's some similarities there you can get from the description, but it actually, they turned out to be, despite the sharing essentially the same premise, they are wildly different movies, and it'll be interesting to compare them. So I think we can start with, we started with Spike Lee last week. So we'll do we'll flip back to Marty for this week and talk about After Hours first. So this is a movie, I had always heard about like I said, I didn't really know much about them. Like, I knew After Hours existed and it was called After Hours, and that was it. And I knew that because it's part of the Criterion collection. That's essentially the only thing I knew about it. So I was like, well, there's got to be at least something somewhat unique about this movie, besides besides the fact that it was a Martin Scorsese trying to take on a comedy, a lighter movie of sorts that he didn't really do. But I always just kind of, I think, assumed in the back of my head, because it was Martin Scorsese and it's such an unusual departure to have something like that in his film catalog. I think I always just assumed that it was a sort of experimental failure, kind of like 1941 was for Spielberg. We talked about that last season, and we talked about how Spielberg, he does levity very well, but he doesn't do comedy very well. In 1941, terrible movie. It was not good. If you go back and listen to that, if you want to hear us talk our full thoughts on that one. But so I thought it was kind of similar, obviously, because it was in the Criterion collection. I was like, well, there must be something interesting about this, right? So I watched the movie, and man, I just thought that this movie was hilarious. And I could not believe that Martin Scorsese directed it. Like, it's I actually, it was to the point where I kept saying to myself as I'm watching it, like, this is a Martin Scorsese movie. And, because we're so used to just these like violence and these heavy themes and rage and anger and just all this stuff. And it just, so very little of that was present in this movie. And it was unlike anything I've seen from Scorsese. Uh, I haven't seen his entire filmography, obviously, because other movies like this one that I just haven't seen. But it was really unique, and I was when coming away from it, I was like, man, I had no idea, and it was really great. And to the point where I actually wondered, as I was watching it, and as I had to keep like reminding myself that this was a Martin Scorsese movie, I had to actually ask myself at one point, okay, if this wasn't a Martin Scorsese movie, would this be something where it would does that novelty of it being a Scorsese movie make it funnier? Does it make it like my subconscious knowing that and knowing that this is not something that I would expect from him? Did that make it different in my viewing of it? I haven't really been able to come to a conclusive answer to that question, but the fact that I had to sort of go that route just kind of shows you how interesting and how different it is from his entire filmography to this point.
I think, Jeff, to add on to your point, and I promised that I wasn't going to bring this up. You're talking about Martin Scorsese. We were before we got on here, we were talking about Prince, and we were talking about the Batman soundtrack. And there is something, I think in a similar way, there's almost something to like when you know someone is a genius, that their paint splatters are a little more interesting than maybe someone else's paint splatters might be. And that's kind of how I felt watching After Hours. Um, that it's definitely different, and I really respect him and admire it for it being different. The very first thing I wrote in my notes about this is that this is his Hitchcock movie. This is his, and I think it's a play on it. I don't think he's playing it super serious all the time. This is the one that has really hard inserts. It really feels like almost not a spoof, but a commentary on sort of these weird film noir technique. Um, David Lynch was really big at the time. It kind of has a little bit of a David Lynch vibe as well to me. Uh, he really seems to be. This is
Actually
a
thought it was
movie
a David
where,
Lynch film at one point in my life because before I
yes,
knew it was Scorsese.
yeah, it totally fits that vibe, and I appreciate him. Movie, I we, if you listened to last week's episode, I was on a rant about Scorsese maybe copying himself a little bit too much and being a little too derivative with some of his characters and the stories he's telling. This I really admire because he is clearly trying something else, and maybe he's trying to be somebody else a little bit too much. Um, but I did enjoy it. The other movie that, and this is interesting because it came After Hours was long before this. I don't know if anybody has seen David Fincher's film The Game, but it kind of
I
felt
love that
like
movie. Yes.
that. Yeah, it felt like that. And what I found really interesting watching this movie was David Fincher about The Game has said that it was a mistake for him to make that movie. He has kind of distanced himself from that movie, even though I really like the movie. And I think a
To
lot of people
be
really like the
to
movie.
be fair, I feel as though David Fincher has distanced himself from every movie he's ever made. The dude
This
is
is
one
also
of
true.
those like notorious like haunted artists. He's never had any. I've never heard him say anything good about any of his movies. To be
This is
fair,
this is also true. But something that he said that no, it's a very good point. Something that he says though about The Game that he supposedly dislikes about it is they didn't really know how to end it. And he just kind of said, I just sort of felt at the time if I kept my foot on the throttle and just kept people guessing and getting crazier and crazier and crazier, that it would win out in the end. And I feel that way a little bit about After Hours as well. I don't even know if that's necessarily a criticism, but in reading even just the most elementary details of it, like on the Wikipedia, it was a big deal while they were shooting this movie that they couldn't really figure out how to end it. And there was sort of this debate amongst, the cast and crew and Scorsese and the screenwriter who adapted his own book, and or no, am I getting that right, or am I thinking of 25th Hour? Sorry, this was a spec
25th
script, so I
Hour was
didn't.
adapted his own book, but I'm not sure
Yeah,
about
Yep,
your
you're
but
25th
this
thinking of
was
24th
this
hour.
was yep, this was written on spec though, so it was a screenwriter who just wrote it on spec, and they kind of had this debate about, um, how are we going to end this movie? And that it really felt like The Game to me. It just felt like he was saying, if I just keep my foot on the throttle and keep throwing crazier and crazier things, maybe it will pay off in the end. That was sort of what I came away from it, and having seen it a couple nights ago, that's really what stayed with me. Is just like this was Scorsese just going like, I'm going all in on this film noir, and it's just gonna get batshit crazy after every scene, and what's going to happen at the end, and we'll figure it out, and maybe the payoff will work and maybe it won't.
This movie's a mindfuck, and I love it. I'm
Hey,
so glad we picked this movie to watch. This is my favorite Martin Scorsese movie.
Yeah,
That's a big
that
statement, but
ooh,
that's
we
big. That's huge.
didn't promise any sizzling hot takes, but that's we're
That's
turning on.
that's
We're turning
simmering.
on.
It's starting to
We're
simmer a
turning.
little
Yeah,
bit.
the grill's on, and we're turning it up.
That's pretty hot. I realize. It's just so different from it. Like you guys have said, it's so different from everything else he's done, and it's. I don't know. I'm not the film expert that you guys are, the professor, nor the hobbyist, the professional hobbyist that you are, Jeff. But it's I don't know that he's breaking any new ground industry wide, but he is for himself. It sure seems, as you guys have said. Nate, you nailed it. So one of our sources here is Scorcese on Scorcese here, and he says, "Oh goodness, I had a bookmark and then it fell out." Uh, After Hours is to some extent, this is him, his own statement. After Hours is to some extent a parody of Hitchcock's style. And then he goes on to talk about there's one particular scene where he's running with the invitation in his hand, where Paul, the main character, Paul Hackett, which, by the way, a little bit of an aside, wasn't that the name of a god-awful offensive coordinator for the Chiefs back in the early 2000s? Paul Hackett. Am I just...
Correct.
Okay, I thought we got away from that, and I had a little bit of PTSD when I heard the name. But anyway, so when Paul Hackett's running with the invitation, he says that he modeled that after a shot in the movie Marty, which I don't know, I've never seen, but apparently it's a famous scene when she's holding a gun and she's going to shoot a horse. Very famous.
I haven't
scene,
seen Marty, but the movie as a collective definitely had some like North by Northwest kind of vibes, where it's like, oh, just a normal dude living his life, and then by the end of the movie he's climbing Mount Rushmore dodging bullets. So yeah, that sort of just keep pushing, keep going, keep moving. And I so the lead actor Griffin Dunne, right? I, I had to look that up because I had no clue who this guy was. I've never seen him in anything, not since, and I have no idea why this guy didn't become a bigger star because his deadpan delivery and timing is fantastic. He might have been ahead of his time. Like he's got some real Jason Bateman. I guess at this point, Jason Bateman would have had his type of vibes, but the I just I think one of the times when I laugh the hardest, he goes home with the is it Rosanna Arquette, Roxana Arquette, what I can't remember. It's Arquette, but I can't remember if it's Roxana or Rosanna.
I think it's oh gosh, I have it written down here. Rosanna Arquette.
Rosanna Arquette.
And yes, she is a sister to David and Patricia and all the billion
she's
Arquettes.
part of that whole deal. But so he goes home with her, and then he ends up giving the massage to the roommate, who's the paper mache artist, right? Like we're already in the absurd, and then she's all like trying to be this like tortured poet, and she's like, some women have scars all over their entire body, and he just kind of like just a subtle wince, and he goes, scars. Just like his delivery, I just lost it, and I was like, man, what happened to this guy? Why was he not bigger? And it just, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to research it, but like the whole movie he was having lines like that, and I think he just nailed it. Like he was the perfect guy to do that, and it just like it really he sold that whole thing for me. And then you talked about the ending, and it's sometimes I feel like those best endings kind of sort of happen like that when they can't decide and they just go with one. But I mean, I loved it. It was just because it for a second there at the end, right? He's encased in this tomb of paper mache. He can't talk. He can't move. All he's got is his eyes, and it's like Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong have stolen him, thinking he's just a normal statue. It's like, is he just going to live out the rest of his days? And it's like, did this turn really dark all of a sudden? And then he falls out, and it breaks open, and he's right in front of his office building where we started the movie. And then he just walks right in and sits down and goes back to work. And it's just like there's, and not only is that just funny in general, but also this sort of, little bit of like symbolism there of like everything you went through, and then he's just back where he started. But
it's
he's disheveled.
Kafkaesque.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought the ending was fantastic.
And there's so much to unpack. I mean, first of all, did any of this really happen? I mean, is it absurd reality, or is this a fever dream? Is it just a dream period? There's just so much to unpack, and I just love thinking about it. Um, oh
There's
man,
no like the New York that's being depicted here is very quiet and is very empty.
yeah, it's abandoned. This is
And
not the city that
it,
never sleeps, even though there
right,
are diners open and clubs.
yep, but I don't disagree, Steve, with this notion of like I'm not implying that the movie's implying that this is all a dream. I mean, I think it happens, but I don't know if it happens in the reality that we live in. I don't think it happens in the reality that Taxi Driver or Raging Bull or Mean Streets or Goodfellas lives in. It's not that same reality. Um, it's an entirely different thing, and he's clearly created this entirely different kind of New York and this different kind of world. Um, and it's so weird. It's funny you said Jason Bateman. The kind of the person that I was thinking a lot of is like now sort of modern Ryan Gosling, kind of with that deadpan approach. It reminded me a lot of him in a movie like The Nice Guys, where everything is just the way he kind of his gaze, and it's very well directed. I mean, the way he shifts his eyes and his gaze in some of these scenes almost is like dare I say almost kind of like a Looney Tunes sort of approach, like where the old cartoons were like
Yeah,
Bugs Bunny would kind of glance one way and the other. It has this very slapsticky sort of like it is
The
really funny. There's really subtle
madcap
moments that are funny.
madcap is the word that kept coming to mind for me. This like
Yeah.
madcap series of events, and like because especially to your point of like almost cartoon like, especially when he gets the paper mache on his shirt, and so he has to change, and he gets this like
hmm
weird sort of nightclubby shirt, and then he's got this white suit already, and he puts it on, and it's got this sort of Miami Vice, like a leisure suit vibe, and then as the night goes on, his hair gets more disheveled, and so he starts to take on this weird sort of caricature look because the hair with that makes his head look bigger inside this suit. I mean, it was just there was so much that I'm just like, man,
love it
not
because
only
it's
can I not believe that this is a Martin Scorsese movie, I can't believe that at least once more he hasn't tried something like this. Because
yeah,
maybe it
that's
was
the
a box
crazy
office
thing.
failure at the time or something, but I mean, it seems like it's pretty well respected today. I've seen a lot of people in different movie subreddits that mention it and say how much they love it and stuff.
Apparently
But
become a cult classic. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, so this is like one of the top notes on Wikipedia, and I skimmed through his filmography, and I think this is still accurate. It says to date, this is the last feature-length film Scorsese's directed that's not an adaptation or a biopic, and that's crazy because this movie came out almost 40 fucking years ago.
I tell you what's really crazy about that is I used a phrasing earlier where like the movie was written on spec, and basically what that means is a screenwriter just gets an idea and they write the idea, and it gets pitched to studios, and maybe a studio picks it up, maybe they get financial backing, and maybe it gets greenlit, maybe you get all these people involved in it, and the movie gets made. That's really surprising to me, just because like
Well, this one's even
the
crazier. Sorry to interrupt, Nate. This one's even crazier because these guys, the writers slash producer, they independently funded it. They took out a loan that was contingent upon it getting picked up. It was originally based on a guy, I think in Columbia University in a writing class, just wrote a story and then turned it into a screen,
yes,
and then they self-financed it with a loan. And then Scorsese, it just happened to land in his hands when he was trying to film Last Temptation of Christ, and there were lots of fits and starts with that because of the politics around it. And he was like, you know what, let's do it. And they shot it very much like Taxi Driver, quick and dirty, shoot it real fast. Plan every single shot. We'll get in, we'll do this quick, and so yeah, it's like you're saying. I mean, I'll let you finish your thought, but it's even crazier than that. I mean, these guys literally bet on themselves. The screenwriter,
oh, and
whoever funded them.
surprising because Scorsese now it I guess what I'm surprised by is that someone like Steven Spielberg will get ideas for movies, and then he'll work with a screenwriter to adapt what is, roughly his idea into a screenplay. I'm surprised that Scorsese doesn't do that more. That everything he's getting is from a book or is from someone's life. it's just surprising that since the mid 1980s, Scorsese hasn't had a single idea on his own that he was just like, this is an idea I have for a movie. I want to adapt it into a movie. Um, at, maybe that's just the way he works. Obviously, he's been very successful doing that. He's been very successful adapting books and bringing people's life to the screen. But maybe that's just what he wants to do, obviously. But it just kind of seems like, why would a director that big not occasionally be like, this is kind of a good idea that I have. I should just hire a screenwriter and they can write it and we can go make the exact movie that I just thought of. And it's so weird
Yeah.
that this is the last one. Like,
Well,
it's such a weird movie.
and even his next project is The Wager, which is based on a book that came out last year.
Yeah,
I
adaptation.
just read it, and it's so yeah, that's a very interesting point. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. And even this, even though it wasn't an adaptation, it still wasn't like his story that he hooked up. Because yeah, you talk about Spielberg. I mean, he had like David Koepp and guys like that. He works with a lot, in terms of writers.
Well, that's
And
literally like,
Spike Lee works with a lot of similar writers too that he's worked collaborated with over the years. So yeah,
or,
that is
or if you're like Quentin Tarantino, you write it yourself. Like, you're a writer director.
Christopher Nolan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it literally came out this week that Spielberg is thinking about his next movie, and it's like this untitled UFO thing, and it's just an idea he had. It's an idea he had, and who's he working with? He's working with like David Cope or somebody like that. He just who's
Mm.
going to collaborate on, and he just came up with the idea. He's a filmmaker. That's just kind of how he generates ideas, and it's interesting that Scorsese, that's just not how he generates ideas. Again, which is fine. He's a genius. He clearly is able to take other source material and adapt it in a very successful way. Um, it's just, and maybe movie didn't do very well at the box office. Maybe that's kind of what turned him off the notion of just working with a script on spec. But I wish occasionally maybe he would do something that's kind of weirder, like this, just because it was quite a fun ride.
Um. And yeah, I thought like,
Before
go ahead.
I thought you were going to turn to the other movie before.
No.
Before we do that, I got to tell you guys one of the other alternate endings. But feel
There,
free to
there-
finish.
there's alternate endings.
Okay. I thought I thought it was coming. Okay. No, but I was just gonna say that we talked about Griffin Dunne and how good he was, but I mean all the rest of it's like a who's who of the '80s of people that sort of didn't make it past 1995 in terms of like the cultural zeitgeist, like Laura San Giacomo and uh, Rosanna Arquette, and I mean Cheech and Chong. Like they're still kind of around, but this was in their heyday. And John Hurd. I mean, he's no longer alive, but that was
It has
and
both
Terry Gar.
parents. It has both parents from Home
That's
Alone.
right. Catherine O'Hara's in it too,
It
and
has
she's kind of had a
both.
resurgence of late.
Yeah,
But
Yes, but
and
it
they
has
interact with each
both
other even.
I know it has both the Home Alone parents. So watching
that's
Yeah.
that,
true.
I was
I didn't
like,
even forgot about
there
that
you go.
because I remember like he goes into the bar and I was like, because I'm just trying to catch up with the absurdity of the movie at this point, and I'm like, and now he goes into a bar and it's the dad from Home Alone and Teri Gar. Oh my god! Even though Home Alone at this point hadn't even existed, but um, yeah, and it was all those performances too were great. I mean, John Hurd was great. Catherine O'Hara was perfect. Teri Gar was hilarious. Like I mean, Teri Gar in this era is so funny. Like Young Frankenstein is one of my favorites, and she's fantastic in that, and just was way underutilized. I think even in that time. Um, but yeah, Catherine O'Hara too. Like her
Hmm.
little scene, she's trying to dial a number and she keeps fucking with him, being just
Yeah.
like
Keeps
saying
messing
random
with him.
numbers because it's 1988 when this movie takes place or whatever. So he can't just look at his cell phone. He's got to do the rotary dial and all that, and she's messing with him, and he
Well,
can't.
first he has to
do
get the number from the operator, for God's sake. Yeah.
Yeah, he calls, and you have to tell the operator where you see.
Yeah.
I mean, oh man,
So
yeah,
I
I
definitely want
quite
to
enjoyed this
keep
movie.
the cast in mind because I do think I put this on our outline and I want to compare when we get to the other movie. I want to compare these casts. Who used these casts better because both of them have, a fairly star-studded cast, for their respective times. You just mentioned a whole bunch of them, and I think one of them does it a little bit better than the other. But yeah, it's
Well, I mean,
just a
that's
wild movie.
yeah, and totally enjoyable. Highly recommended. Um, and now, I mean that's a good segue into talking about 25th Hour, which
All right.
is
Well, no, hang on.
oh
So
oh
they didn't know how to end this
here's the
movie.
yes, I forgot. You told me and I forgot. Go
Okay.
for it. Alternate
So
ending.
there were a whole bunch really that they couldn't figure it out, right? And I signed. So he says, I signed to do the film on the understanding that we would just come up with a good ending. The idea was to shoot the picture, put it together, and we'd realize how to go beyond that. The original ending in the script had Paul going out to buy an ice cream for June down in the basement, and that was it. That was just, it was going to end that way. Then they kicked around a whole bunch of other different things. This is the weirdest one. they they were going to have oh my god. This so definitely weird warning and not safe for work warning if anyone's listening. If you've gotten this far though, um, one of the folks, the screenwriter, came up with the woman that he's with in the basement, the woman that's making the plaster of Paris or paper mache, that puts him in the basement, suddenly growing in size while people were banging on the door. We weren't going to use trick photography or anything. You just see Paul and then you'd cut, so you'd be looking up between her knees on each side of the frame with this little figure between them. She'd say a line like, "You know what to do now." And he'd say, "Well, I've never really had much experience before in returning to the womb." She would reply, "It's really all right if you have a waterproof watch on. Just take it off if you don't." And then he'd go inside her. He just disappears off the bottom of the frame. And then you cut to him born naked, curled up on the cobblestones in the middle of 57th Street. The camera's looking down on him. He gets up and then he runs like hell home. So that
I
was
think I kind of would
apparently
have loved that too. I liked the ending they had, but that would have been hilarious.
So what what an idea. The actual ending that they had filmed and screened for people, including Steven Spielberg, was they just had him they had Cheech and Chong just steal him like they do in the movie, and it just ends. And when they screened that to people, everyone was like, "What the hell, man? I want to see, we've been with this character for 2 hours. We got to see how it ends." And so various people, including Steven Spielberg and Michael Powell, who is a famous director, suggested what we wound up getting. And that's what they wound up doing. So,
Yeah, because
but yeah,
when they were just driving away and he's in the plaster of Paris suit, I was like, man, this is gonna be real dark. Like this is where Scorsese had to insert his Scorseseness, maybe.
it's
And
already
then it
been
kind
kind
of
of dark. But yeah, that would have been very, very.
like if they just would have like stolen him and then it kind of fade to black, but the fact that they stole him and it like hung on him for a while as he's driving away and you can see his eyes and he's looking around and he's like trying to signal or something, get somebody's attention and he can't. That's when it's just like, oh man, this could be really bad, really dark, and but they pulled it back. So
It's
I think that's probably the
Kafkaesque,
smart
like the
decision.
freaking what is it? The bug, the beetle? What's the name of that?
I have not
The
read.
metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis.
There we go.
So yeah, that's
Even though
interesting. That would
Just
have been
before we move,
very interesting. I love non sequitur dialogue like that when it's done right. Like it's very David Lynchian to be like, if you have a waterproof
if you have
watch,
a waterproof watch, it's not
that's
so.
awesome. I love it.
Oh Lord,
All right,
what
so
just
a
FYI,
film.
before we get to 25th hour, Paul Hackett was the Chiefs' offensive coordinator from 1993 to 1997.
Nathaniel
Marty
Hackett,
Hall.
former
Yeah,
Broncos
that's
head
right.
coach
That's his son.
and Jets,
Oh
yeah, is
Lord,
his son.
good
So,
Lord.
fun times. No
Nothing
relation
like
to After Hours, though.
the pure merit system that the NFL
Yes, right.
has set up.
Although, if there was an NFL coach who would have an evening like Paul Hackett did, Nathaniel Hackett would be the prime candidate. um, that's maybe we should can we recast all these movies with NFL coaches? Is that possible? Can we do that? That's
That
another
sounds
podcast.
like
That's
a minisode right there. That's an
that is a
NFL draft
mini-sode.
minisode we should do.
That's a good call.
Hey,
Hey, there we go. Ideas. um, but now we'll go into 25th Hour from Spike Lee, and we've got another fantastic cast on this one, right? You've got Edward Norton as your main character, Philip Seymour Hoffman. God, like, just as an aside here, okay? most of the time, sometimes like you get Hollywood actors, directors, whoever that die, and it's sad, of course, but you move on. Life goes on, but there are a few actors that have really like hit me, and I still think to this day, like, man, I miss those actors. I miss seeing them in new movies. Obviously, I can watch their old ones anytime, and seeing what they would have become, right? And Philip Seymour Hoffman is absolutely one of them. I absolutely love Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's such a fantastic actor. So it's great to see him in a movie. Barry Pepper, who I'm a big fan of, Saving Private Ryan. He was Roger Maris in 61. Rosario Dawson again. She was in He Got Game, in another Spike Lee movie. Anna Paquin, Brian Cox, man, and then again, Edward Norton. Brian Cox played his dad, and Brian Cox playing Edward Norton's dad is maybe the most fitting casting I think I've ever seen. As they're in real life, they're both very similar in their curmudgeonly difficulty um, to work with, but they worked very well on screen here. But so I kind of alluded to this at the top of the show, where I said it was a little bit different for Spike Lee, and to expound on that a little bit. So um, to this point, majority of what we talked about with Spike Lee has been he definitely deals with heavy themes. This is definitely very much what he aspires to do, and he does it very well. And I think what sets this movie just a little bit different, it still deals with those heavy scenes, but I think, from what I've seen, whether it's School Days, or whether it's Do the Right Thing, or even Clockers, that we talked about last week, there's there's things that happen in these movies that are sad, and there's also like there's a lot of things that happen that make me angry, that make me want to change things, that make me want to go out and do something to try and help make things better, right? And that usually comes from a little bit of the anger, I think, that is present in the films, and I think that's a good thing, to be clear. But that's sort of how I felt watching a lot of his movies. But then with this one, there wasn't necessarily, for lack of a better term, a sort of call to action with this. For this, it was just sad. It was a sad movie the whole way through, from top to bottom. That doesn't mean it was bad, and I'm definitely not saying that. I think I was unprepared for how sad it was, because obviously I knew going in it was this guy was going to prison. He had one final day before going to prison, and he goes and talks to people, so there's going to be some sadness there, but I thought there also might be some, you know I don't know, maybe you reminisce, maybe you try and really, but there wasn't any sort of like coming together for these people, right? It was just more falling apart, and the whole thing, their friend group that was already sort of scattered, completely falls apart even more, and everybody in the movie makes terrible, unadvisable, bad decisions the whole time. None of them are likable. The only one, Rosario Dawson's character of Naturel, she's the only one that I thought was likable. It doesn't mean they're bad characters, but it was just like the characters themselves, the decisions they made, the type of people that they were. Um, and it's someone like I think the Barry Pepper character, Frank, I think his name was. I think we were supposed to dislike him. Like, he was not he wasn't a guy that we were intended to root for. So some of it is planned, of course, but then um, I think there was also, for me, there was like the one thing that was sort of like weirdly discordant that I couldn't really quite place. Like, why do they keep hitting on this? Um, is this sort of like weird pedophile angle? This like it kept coming up. Like, there was Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, and he's a high school teacher, and he teaches he's got these. Anna Paquin is one of the students in his class. She's very attractive. He's clearly got this thing for her. He's like weirdly obsessing in a very Philip Seymour Hoffman-y way over her. And then um and then later, we find out, we get a flashback to how Edward Norton's character Monty, how he met Rosario Dawson's character Naturel, and on a freaking playground, and she's in high school, and like they make it very clear in the scene that she's 18 at the time. Like they repeat it multiple times. It's very clear that they were cognizant of what was happening there, but it was still like it was a discussion they were having, and she even asks him, what would you do if I would have said I was 17? And he said, well, it would be a shorter conversation. And so it's just like there's this, and I'm like, what? I don't understand what the placing of this is and throughout. And they kept kind of coming back to it, and eventually Philip Seymour Hoffman, they randomly run into his student who is clearly trying to pretend like she's older to get into this club, and Monty's like, hey, bring her back, because he slips in and out of this mode where he's like his old self, where everything is great and he's the king of the town, and then he remembers he's going to prison the next day, and so there's this sort of weird vacillation. But then right when they meet this girl, he's like, let's bring her in, let's do this. He becomes his charming self, and gets her in past the bouncers, and then eventually Philip Seymour Hoffman makes the just awful decision to come onto her in the middle of the club, and knows that he's essentially throwing his life and his career away, because there's no way a 16-year-old girl is going to keep that sort of an interaction quiet. So um, maybe that was the point, just setting all that up so that his character could have this sort of downfall. But I don't know. I mean, what did you guys think of that particular aspect of it? Because uh, it was it, if you're going somewhere with it, I think okay. But for me, I couldn't quite place like what are they trying to say with this?
I think that this movie has. So I had never seen this movie. I had heard about it. I remember it coming out at the time, and I'm glad I didn't watch it at the time because I don't think I would have really understood it at the time. Um, I think that what they're trying to do is that all of these characters, it's everyone's 25th hour, and everyone, only one of them is going to prison. There's sort of this finality to that. Everyone is sort of trying to imagine these other lives that they could have. And clearly the Philip Seymour Hoffman character is almost I do think there is a parallel to Monty and Natural and how their relationship began, however awkward. He's almost envisioning that for himself. And as creepy as it is, I appreciate there's a moment where they go into a bathroom together and they kiss. And it is the least romantic kiss in cinematic history. Um, it is completely off-putting. It feels wrong. They both feel
It
that it
was
is
gross.
wrong.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, they both feel that it's wrong.
Very,
And
very icky.
I appreciate that the movie, if it's gonna go there, to show it that way. There is our beloved Roger Ebert. I have to read this paragraph because he wrote about this moment. Um, and I have really admired the craft that Spike Lee put into this particular moment. This is Roger Ebert when he re-reviewed it for his great movies list in 2009, I think. Everybody knows that Spike Lee is an important filmmaker, but do they realize how good he is with actors and how innovative he is with style? We live in a period when many filmmakers use either a straightforward meat and potato style or draw attention with meaningless over editing, queasy cams, and showboat shots. With Lee, as with any classical director, the emphasis is on the story and the people, but he's always there, nudging us, being sure what we notice, moving his camera not merely with efficiency, but with grace and innovation. Because he doesn't go out of his way to call attention, how many realize what a master stylist he is? And first of all, I love that quote about Spike Lee. That particular moment, what makes it feel, and this is a detail that you just notice, what makes it feel so awkward in this very like middle school way, in a way you don't kiss someone. Philip Seymour Hoffman's hand goes up to her shoulder, almost kind of like he's holding her, like both of her shoulders with his hands, instead of like hug it. You know how you would like kiss someone, like you'd hug someone, or you maybe like hold them by the neck or the head, like in a romantic way. This is not that, and it just comes off like it's so unbearably uncomfortable, and it's that kind of small detail that I think, without anybody saying anything, no one says anything in that scene, that he just walks out, and you know that was a huge mistake that is clearly not going to work or be beneficial to either of their lives. It's really kind of gross. And he kind of has it. Then it is the famous Spike Lee tracking shot thing where the background moves behind him and the actor's clearly on like a dolly or something. Um, I just that to me is just such an incredible craft and style with that particular moment. And again, Jeff, to answer your question, I think what's happening there is he's kind of imagining this sort of his 25th hour is sort of this like, but I have this life with this girl that I'm clearly inappropriately attracted to, and she's my student. And even if she's not of age, but even if she were of age, there's all these ethical complications that go way over the line. And I think he's imagining that. And I think, when it kind of comes down to it, the finality of all of those stories is the best moment of this movie is when Brian Cox, Edward Norton's dad in this movie, he's driving him to prison, and he starts to imagine this scenario where he says, "What if I didn't take you? What if we just drove across this entire country?" And he imagines this whole life for his son, where Natural Out comes out and like they settle somewhere and he drops him off in some random town in the desert and he's able to make a new identity there, and Natural is able to come out there and meet him, and they have this family and these kids, and it's so, you want it so much. It's such a beautiful, happy. I literally smiled like when she got off the bus of this clearly fictional thing, fantasy that's not going to happen. I could not help but smile because it felt like such a wonderful, happy ending. And then when it just erases and it goes back to him in the car, and is it? I think that's what it is. I think they're all living out these fantasies. It's like one more night to do all this stuff. There's all these fantasies that they're living out. None of them can make it happen. I really love this movie. I love it. I was surprised by how much I loved this movie and what this movie was trying to do.
That's a really interesting take. I like that. And I agree that, and to be clear, to point out my questioning of those scenes was definitely not the direction, because I do agree that scene was fantastic. And the like especially and Anna Paquin played that really well also. Like her reaction, you know, it's this sort of like controlled done, like, I mean, at the time she's drugged up, she's on E, and she's drunk, and she's but it's not this like shock where she's got her eyes wide and her mouth agape, and she's like, why would you do that? She doesn't say anything, she just stares at him, almost like she's questioning her own reality, like, did this happen?
He's
What's
fucking with
going on here?
he is screwing with him. But I think in the end, she is still a young, innocent person.
She did
And
not
she's
expect
pushing,
him to actually take the
and she's
bait.
yep, she's pushing and she's pushing and she's pushing because she needs the attention. And then when he actually goes for it, it's betrayal. I mean, that's what's on her face. It is this sense of betrayal that even though she was the one pushing, she's the child.
Yeah.
She's the child. It's not her fault. It's his fault. She's the child in all of this. And it's a sense of betrayal that this guy that I think she kind of trusts actually went there. And it's a gross. I feel weird talking about it because such a gross scene, but it's so well acted and it's so well done.
Yeah.
And the way that it's handled, you see sometimes in movies some of these types of sort of weird, creepy things sort of romanticized. And I really appreciated a movie like this kind of going there and not romanticizing it even in the slightest, and letting the audience know that this is completely perverted and messed up
Yeah.
and it's not right and they feel it's not right. It's a really good scene. I really appreciated the scene and what it's trying to do.
There's
Yeah.
nobody better than Philip Seymour Hoffman to play that character too. He's just so good at characters like that. We talked about that the other day, Jeff. He can play he had this amazing ability to play someone who has this veneer of someone who's likable and you trust him, but he's just a scumbag. Or it can be vice versa, you know? It looks to
Going to
be a
sorry,
scumbag. But
sorry,
go ahead.
just to interject from that same Roger Ebert review. This is how he ends this review, just like as a little side note. One more note about acting. I've seen a lot of people drinking in a lot of movies. I've seen them sobering up the morning after. But I don't remember anyone starting out sober, getting drunk, and then returning to sobriety quite like Hoffman does it here. We know exactly where he's at during these transitions, but we never see them happening. That just, again, speaks to the subtle.
And this is part of why I get so sad thinking about how he's no longer with us. Like it's,
Yeah.
I mean, he was like a force. Like he is just incredible. I mean, you go from I love uh Along Came Polly, Sandy Lyle, his character in that. I cannot stop laughing whenever he's on the screen, you know? And then but then you got this sort of then you go back to like Boogie Nights, right? Where he's this sort of he seems at first like he's this sort of laughable kind of comic relief, but he's actually this really tortured soul. And it just yeah, you go it's completely genuine the whole way and you feel it through he's such a phenomenal actor, and it's just so sad that you know how that he's no longer with us. But man, yeah, he's a bright spot of every movie he's in.
I would argue that he is not. He's in bad movies, but I don't think he is bad in any movie. Like, there's a scene in frickin' Patch Adams, which is not a good movie,
No.
and is completely disowned by the actual Patch Adams. Like, the actual doctor doesn't like the
Yeah,
movie. Okay?
correct.
So, like, it's clearly not a good movie. But the scene between he and Robin Williams, where he kind of the Philip Seymour Hoffman character, who's this bookworm and is studying, is trying to be really good. He just has this total meltdown, and he's like, "I want to be a good doctor," and he kind of goes in this thing about, "Yes, maybe I am an asshole, but if your life is on the line." And you are lying on that operating table. Do you want someone who's playing fun and games, or do you want the asshole? Because at the end of the day, I want the asshole that's studied and knows what. Like that scene is amazing. He completely elevates this material in a movie that's not good. That's widely accepted. It's not good. That's how good he was. That he could take even that kind of mediocre stuff and just make it something incredible.
We could we could do a mini sode on Philip Seymour Hoffman. I would be okay with that. But you know, he's not the only one who was great. Edward Norton, like you know, Nate, you remember you saying with when we did Kingdom of Heaven last year, Edward Norton's role was one of your favorites that you've seen in the last, you know, few decades
He's one of
even.
my
And
that I
he
I
was
was reminded of
fantastic in
that
this
role,
movie.
and
He was really
yeah,
good.
he's good in this movie. Yeah, I was reminded a lot of the Kingdom of Heaven of the Leper King, which I had not seen that before we recorded that episode, and that's probably one of my favorite performances, like I said, of the last 25 years. And you don't even see his face in that. Um, he's obviously very expressive here. The moment for me, for the acting moment for me, is when putting on this facade, he's trying to do all these things, and then finally he really breaks down in the apartment. I mean, I think it really comes down to him like, I'm about to go to prison. I'm about to go to prison. And he finally kind of starts to cry and break down a little bit. He kind of pleads it like his dad is trying to drive him to the prison. He says, "Dad, please, like can we just you just got to walk away now. It's easier for me if we do it this way." And the dad is like, "No, I need to for visits and stuff. I got to drive you up there so I know where it is." It's this really intimate kind of father-son thing that they just oh man. There's some good acting in this. Like there's some really good acting in this movie. It just it's carried really really well.
Yeah, and I thought the scene where because the reason he's going to prison is because the DEA got a tip about his drug dealing, and no, before I get into that, like I think it's kind of interesting that with Edward Norton, this almost feels like a sort of riff on the character he played in Rounders, but like sort of taken to the next level, both in acting performance and in just like the character you know being more interesting and better because he sort of kind of still got that like you know suave sort of criminal veneer to him, but then there's an underbelly of someone who's just scared. And that's when you're talking about the breakdown, that's he's scared. He is 100% scared. He admits to it. Um, but when he initially got touched, as he said, to where he got the DEA found out and they got him and they going to send him to jail or to prison, and he um, people are sort of filling his head this whole movie with it was natural, it had to be, who else knew where you kept the drugs, who else knew where you kept the money, and his dad is like, no, there's no way, she loves you, and but all his friends are like, it's definitely her, she's the one who did it. And so he's like questioning himself, this woman that he loves, did she really do this? And eventually we find out in the club that they're at that it's not them, it's this other Russian guy he's been friends with forever, or not forever, but for a long time within the
It's the
movie.
goose.
The goose?
It's not just any Russian guy. It's the goose, Tony Saragusa.
That was Tony
You,
Saragusa?
you don't.
I
You
didn't even
didn't realize
realize
that?
that.
Yeah.
No. Holy crap.
Yeah.
He played, I had no idea. And
Yeah.
he's no longer with us either, is he? Right? Did he die?
No, he passed away a couple years
Damn,
ago.
well, that stinks. But I had no idea. I didn't even look it up. I think I just assumed it was like a Russian actor. Good for him. That was a good performance for him then. But yeah, like that he finds out eventually the like Russian mob boss is like, this is the guy who did it. And then he finally admits to it. And Edward Norton's got the gun to his head, and it's like he's already going to prison. What could committing murder right now? Everybody wants me to do it. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to know. I can just pull the trigger and it would be done. And then he kind of, you can just see it, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna make this worse. I'm not going to perpetuate any further. And then he's just like, you told me to trust this guy, you clean up your own mess. And then he leaves, and of course they end up, we don't see it fully, but they likely end up killing him anyway. But that was just kind of, I thought that was a really good scene. And but yeah, then after that, you right before he gets to the part or that he breaks down in the apartment, it was just this just really difficult scene to watch, where he and his friends are the Philip Seymour Hoffman, Barry Pepper, and Edward Norton are just taking a walk. At this point, it's morning. He's getting really, really close to the time, and this whole movie too, they've been as a in addition to filling his head with his girlfriend uh, turning him in, they also keep saying stuff like, you're a good looking guy. You're not gonna have a good time in prison, right? Essentially, that he's gonna be assaulted constantly because of how good looking he is. And so eventually, they're walking together, and he tells the Barry Pepper, who the whole movie is kind of sort of got anger issues, kind of fly off the handle, very, very sort of scatterbrained type of guy. And Edward Norton's just like, you got to beat the shit out of me. I cannot go into prison looking like this the first day. You got to do this. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do this. You're my friend. And then it's kind of like, because I mean, we've all had these friends, right? That you've known each other forever, and you sort of take for granted that you're friends, but you can sort of go in and out with them, right? Where sometimes it's just like, this person annoys the ever loving crap out of me, and I don't want to be around them anymore. But you're so ingrained, you're so used to it, you're so just best friends that that's what you do. And so then it becomes almost like this sort of familial thing, and that's the relationship that they had. None of them seem to really like each other at this time, but they've been friends forever, and they've known each other forever, and so that's what they did. They were friends. And so Edward Norton's kind of just like pushing him and pushing him and pushing him, and then he finally just snaps, and he does it. He beats the crap out of him, and then eventually, Philip Seymour Hoffman pulls Barry Pepper off, and then once Edward Norton can stand up, and then he goes up and he hugs Barry Pepper, and it's like this sort of really just like really difficult scene to watch. A lot of just anger and rage, and their anger at each other, and it's also this sort of projection of anger at themselves, because nobody likes where they are in this movie. Nobody likes where they are in life, except for, again, Naturelle. She seems to be okay with where, besides the fact that her boyfriend is going to prison. Like, she's the only one that seems like she has any sort of modicum of true happiness in this world, where the other ones are just these just sad sack, horrible. It just and it was just more sadness on top of what had been so sad in this whole movie. And I just don't think I was prepared for the level of just morose sadness in this movie. I just it's one of the, and again, that's not a bad thing. I walked away from it feeling just like, oh man, it was depressing.
It's unrelenting dourness. That's certainly true. And my ultimate take on the movie, I think, is that but for the fact that it is a time capsule and a cultural artifact of post 9/11 New York, and a way kind of a city grieving and going through this PTSD of 9/11, which is very much was not the original intent of the movie or the novel. That was all kind of that happened during production. This movie would, I think, not be a failure because these actors are so, they're so good, and I think Spike Lee is obviously so talented, and Barry Brown, his editor, is so good. Oh, these people are just too talented to make a bad film, I think. But to me, it would just kind of come and go as just a very just slog of a humorless movie. Which, movies don't have to be funny, of course, to have humor, but there's got to be something there that makes you want to live a little bit, give you a little bit of hope. But I think the saving grace for me is it's this perfect combination of you. One of you said it earlier. All these characters are having their 25th hour, right? It's the what if. All of these characters are looking at lives that could have been, possibilities that have been snatched from them based on decisions they've made or things that have happened to them. And in a way, the city and the country and the world all had that happen to them with 9/11. And the film is kind of in a way, the city is a mirror of these characters' journeys. And I think it's interesting that the story managed to be in production at the same time as that happened. And I think the fact that they came together at the same time was really fortunate for both of them. I mean, it didn't turn into be a commercial success, but as I don't know if you guys looked up much in the way of critical acclaim and things like that about this movie, but a lot of people have put it on their, top movies of the 2010s, or, best movies about New York, or, best movies of the new century, things like that. So it's had pretty good critical recognition. And I think, to me, this movie is not nearly as good without the looming presence of post 9/11 New York right there. I mean, they're in it. It's commented on constantly.
And that's
One
something
of
I'm really
them
talking about. That's an
literally,
interesting. That's
well, and
it's very present.
the Barry Pepper character, literally his apartment overlooks Ground Zero.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a extended sequence where they're talking and looking out, and this is like, less than a year after 9/11, so
2002, the
they're
movie
like
came
still
out.
Yeah.
like they're still clearing out ground. I mean, that
It's
took a
literal
long time to
months.
clear. Like they're still
Like, I
clearing
think
out
that's
Ground
actual
Zero.
footage of ground. Like,
Well,
No, it
and I
is. It's
think
actual footage of them clearing it, and then one of them is like, and now we know this. Like, it's crazy now looking on this like 20 years later,
mm-hmm.
um, where one of them is like, the New York Times says the air is really bad down here. It could be dangerous for us. The guy's like, well, fuck the Times. I read the Post, and now we do know that like the air quality down there at that time was very poor, and people are later first responders and stuff are suffering from diseases and dying from cancerous diseases because of the air quality and stuff. So it is very much a time capsule for that, and I think it fits the mood of this movie. Um, I wondered, the novel kind of, I wrote in my notes, was this better as a novel? 'Cause there is just something sort of about the wandering around a city, kind of a James Joyce Ulysses sort of feel to it, that I almost wonder if some of these characters came off a little bit better in a novelization form. It made me interested enough that I might even want to read the novel myself.
where you can
Um,
at least see a little bit. You can get a little bit more insight into their thoughts and
Yeah, you
yeah.
kind of feel like there's a little bit more being hinted at here, but yeah,
Interesting
it's
note:
just it's
the author of the book and the screenplay, David Benioff, who is Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
He just did Three Body Problem for Netflix. So that was pretty crazy. I caught that at the beginning. I was like, oh
Yeah.
whoa. I did the Leonardo DiCaprio
It's like that's
scene.
him.
But it's actually it's
I
kind of funny too because between the two movies, um, I don't know that I would have necessarily said, "Oh, I think After Hours is or could have been a Spike Lee movie," but I definitely would say 25th Hour could have been a Martin Scorsese movie. And that two specific instances. Number one, there's this scene where he's in the bathroom and he's looking in the mirror and he is stationary, but he's imagining himself talking to himself on the other side of the mirror. And it's just this vitriolic rant about everything he hates about New York. And it's racist and it's ugly and it's mean and it's like a 5 minute sequence and it flashes to all the different things in the city that he's talking about. And it was very reminiscent of, Taxi Driver as he's driving around and he's seeing all these different things and and saying, in his voiceover that all these things he hates, we need to clean up this city. This is, all this awfulness, whatever. And then Nate, you mentioned how you liked the ending with the sort of imaginary sequence of his possible life, and I actually wasn't a fan of that. It was I don't know. It felt a little too saccharine, maybe a little too on the nose. Even though they like pull it back and it's not something that actually happens, it still was just kind of like
I'm a
give
sucker.
this sort of yeah.
I fell
And
for it. I liked it. And then
oh,
when
you did.
they psyched me out, I
I'm
was
a
like,
sucker. Yeah,
no.
yeah. When she gets off the bus, and it almost is like, shit, is this like a romantic comedy? Like, oh god, it's so nice. Like I want it to be true, and I knew it wasn't. Like you kind of are sitting there going like, something's
I didn't.
obviously off here. Like this
I'm,
isn't
I'm an easy
going to
mark.
happen.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think like when they get to the part where he's got all like the kids and the grandkids, and they're all wearing the same outfit with the white
Okay, I was
shirts, and
starting to suspect at
I
that
was
point.
like, come on. But the regardless of how I felt about it, that scene itself was very reminiscent of like the final 20 minutes in The Last Temptation of Christ, which is essentially, I mean, this is basically like almost like a modern retelling of The Last Temptation of Christ, right? Like he comes up, he's obviously again, it's difference in dealing drugs versus what Jesus did in his life, but uh, you've got this
Hot
point
take
where
alert right here.
you got this point where his friend who betrayed him, right? Tony Saragusa character, Katsia, I can't remember what his name was, but
Yeah, something like
um,
that.
his friend who betrayed him, Judas, right? And then he finds out he's about to be going to prison, similar to being put up on the cross. And then you've got his dad giving him, hey, so say the word. I'll turn left here. We'll drive in the desert. Nobody will ever find you. You can start this whole new life. And he plays out this sequence and we see it in full. And that's exactly what happens with the last temptation of Christ. It's the devil in that case and not his own father, of course. But um, Jesus plays out his life and sees what it would be and what he could happen if he just decides not to take this punishment. And obviously he doesn't. He does take the punishment. And similar to here, obviously we see he doesn't turn left. He just continues to drive on to prison and presumably does his time. So I thought that was kind of interesting because it definitely felt like there was a lot of Scorsese influence in that movie. And if you had shown me those two movies without knowing anything about them, I would have said 100% 25th Hour was the Scorsese movie and not After Hours. So I think it's kind of
Well,
interesting this week.
even visually, the cinematographer for 25th Hour is Rodrigo Prieto, who did Silence, Killers of the Flower Moon, The Irishman. So I'm 100% on board with it, with what you've said. Like it tonally and visually, even just it feels like a Scorsese movie.
All right, it's about that time. I'll lead it off here. So this is a tough week. I did not anticipate enjoying either of these movies going in, and I liked both of them quite a bit more than I thought I ever would have. And so this was it made it into a much tougher week than I anticipated when we initially scheduled this out. And despite the how sad the 25th hour was, a fun week because it's fun to discover new movies that I haven't seen and to like them. But I think I'm gonna go with After Hours. I just think that it was so well constructed, it was so well directed, it was all the performances were perfect, and I really liked the ending. And I think with 25th hour there were just little few things that throughout that were a little bit discordant for me that I kind of, you know, didn't like as much. And like I said, the ending, it wasn't like terrible. I wasn't like I hated it, but I was kind of just like, I'm not a huge fan of this decision to sort of play out that fantasy there, even though I understand why they did it. I still think it was a very good movie, and this was a very close call. But I think I end up going with After Hours for me.
This has been maybe the most rewarding week that I've had doing this. And for whatever reason we're doing this, if nothing more than our own personal enjoyment. Like you said, Jeff, I'd never seen either of these movies, and I loved both of them. It was just really rewarding to kind of expand your own filmography and the things that you've seen. And I'm really glad I've seen both of them. I feel like going forward, the rest of the season, we have a little bit more depth to these filmmakers. I think it's good that we've watched these movies. I feel like there's a little bit of depth revealed in both of these filmmakers that I think is going to inform a lot of things that we are going to talk about probably later in the season. This was a very close week for me. I really do appreciate what Scorsese was doing with After Hours. I am going to go ahead and pick 25th Hour. My primary reason I'm picking 25th Hour is just because, and again, it's based on a novel. It seems a little more purposeful. I think the fact that After Hours they didn't know how it was going to end, and literally admit that they didn't know how it was going to end. It kind of has a little, like I said, I compared it to the game earlier, a little bit of that feel where they're just like, how much can we keep our foot on the throttle? Whereas 25th Hour, there's definitely some more moments that I felt like maybe could have been cut, but I felt like the purpose that it's getting to, and Jeff, you just described it perfectly. It kind of feels sort of like a Stations of the Cross narrative. It's sort of this modern Stations of the Cross kind of thing, um, and particularly the two scenes. Philip Seymour Hoffman's scene with Anna Paquin in the bathroom, which I discussed, and just the level of craft and sensitivity that was dealt with there, I thought was just incredible. And then, like Steve, I'm a Mark. I thought the final sequence there with the monologue with his dad, imagining this this thing. I think that when I see it and when I see it play out, there's almost a sense to me that it's not even his fantasy, that it's his father's fantasy. That his father is trying to just have one last moment where he knows his son screwed up and he knows that it's going to irrevocably hurt their family and who they are, and he's just sort of imagining this perfect life that his son could have had because his son, Monty's very bright, he's really smart, and his life clearly didn't need to be this way, and it's these characters imagining these different things. So I'm going to pick 25th Hour, if for no other reason than I want to see our judge
Up
and
to you,
jury,
Steve.
Eve, decide what it is for this. I'm curious, honestly. This has been very.
I don't like being put in this position, but I hopefully it'll make for entertaining listening if anyone is still hanging on there. So I echo everything you guys said. I having not seen either of these movies, just blown away at how much I enjoyed both. Well, I really enjoyed After Hours. 25th Hour, I respect what it did. Like I said, it was kind of a tough watch, but I see what it was doing and I really appreciate it. And 9/11 for people of our age and older, I think, particularly our age, I'd say even it was a formative time for us. We're all in our mid to late 30s now. Unfortunately. And
Brandon,
it
Brandon just gave us a look as he's past that 40.
did you hit the 4-0, Brandon? You did. You did. Well, so we're at a point where it hit and changed a lot of potential futures for us. And the world, not to make it all about us, but it our lives were shaped in large part by it. And so even though we're not from New York, there's a sense of grief and I'd say even PTSD from 9/11. I don't know about you guys, but when I see a picture of the Twin Towers burning or pre 9/11, I get a cold sweat a little bit. And
Something that I try to emphasize to my students who are seventh graders who obviously weren't born, that people in my generation, I mean, you literally described it as PTSD, and obviously there's different levels of that, and people who were closer to those events certainly feel it more. And it was
yes, not to
a
minimize
certain,
that at all.
yeah, absolutely. There are people who lost people in that, and I'm not in any way suggesting that my pain is the same as theirs, because it's absolutely not. But that was the moment in our lifetime where the world changed, and we do feel a sense of trauma associated with the images from that day. And I actually had a chance to walk through the 9/11 museum with some of my students last summer, and it's them seeing it impact me, and then me seeing them kind of come to the realization of what that meant was kind of an impactful thing. So yeah, it sort of hangs over our generation
Well,
a lot.
yeah, I mean, 23 years later, and anytime I see a plane, that's like maybe just taking off or coming in for landing, and I'm like, that plane's flying really close to the ground. I'm like, what,
Yeah.
And that's what I come 23 years later, I still think of it every time. And we live pretty close to airports, Steve and I, especially for like the downtown airport. So it's not unusual to see planes like
I
that.
mean, yeah,
So
for the rest of our lives. So, I mean, that'll just be something that is unshakable.
yeah.
So I think for all of that, that was the single biggest thing that stuck with me from 25th Hour. And the actors were amazing. The direction was fantastic. But 25th Hour is not my pick. After Hours is.
Got him.
Because it
I
works on
accept this defeat. That's a fine defeat. I knew,
this was close. This it's hard.
yeah,
This isn't
well,
like a
and
loser week. It's
right,
just
right.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Steve,
It's
you
not like
said it's your
one with
favorite Yeah, you said it's your
yeah.
favorite Martin Scorsese movie. So like in the back of my head it was like, I don't know if I have like the argument to convince him on this movie. Like he's probably going to go there. I'm fine with that defeat. That is fine.
It just works on a surface level, as like you were saying, Jeff. It's funny, silly things happen, but there are just so many more layers to it. Like you guys were mentioning the madcap aspect of it, him kind of looking side to side, but that's also very reminiscent of a rat or a mouse trapped in a cage. And there's so much imagery of rats trapped in cages, things that are stuck. He's constantly in
literal
this
rat
maze.
traps.
Yeah, literal mouse.
Surrounding beds of women that he's
Right.
like I will 100% watch that movie again, and probably multiple
Yes.
times. I don't know if I'll ever watch 25th Hour again unless
Right.
like my wife wants to see it or something like that.
Eh,
But and again,
Yeah.
that's no slight to 25th Hour, just that it's a difficult film to watch. It's not like, oh
Exactly.
yay, let's go watch this.
And I feel bad making that pick, but that's the call this week. I think 25th Hour is really high up there on Spike Lee's filmography, though. I haven't sat down and ranked it, but gosh,
Well,
maybe
you
I'll
said it,
save that
Nate.
for another time.
You said it, Nate, that you were um, you were happy that it is one of the most rewarding weeks to watch, and that's a better way of trying to put what I was saying
Yeah,
as well, of just how it's fun to have new movies that I both enjoy. But to just stick, since I'm more familiar with Scorsese's filmography, to just stick with Spike Lee, seeing so many movies even already this season that I hadn't seen. Like I respected Spike Lee as a filmmaker before, but it's even higher now. He's already probably pulled into a top 5 for me just seeing all this. So we're already halfway through the season barely, and I'm already there. So this even though it the movies themselves in terms of subject matter and everything aren't maybe necessarily as fun and as famous as a lot of the Spielberg Scott movies, that's been one of the more fun aspects for me so far as we hit the midway point here to sort of discover even more of Spike Lee
Yeah.
and
It's been very gratifying.
yeah, absolutely.
And we
speaking of
did not
which,
plan it this way, but somehow that did pull them into a tie.
that did pull them into a dead heat. Now we're at 3-3, and I thought
We're
I
not
was going to
doing
lose.
this on purpose.
I
We're
swear we're
not
not
doing this on. If these two end in a dead tie again, like last, there's no way people are going to believe that we're not like faking this out and
So
planning this ahead of time.
well, not only like so this week I had no clue going in, but the next 3 weeks as well, based on what we have, I'm feeling the same. I have no clue which way we're all going to go with these movies, and especially next week, because next week we'll talk about it's this another week with two movies that I have not seen. It is our Buried Secrets week, where we have Red Hook Summer from Spike Lee and Cape Fear from Martin Scorsese. We want to talk about the adaptation, etc. angle. Cape Fear is a remake of a previous movie, also called Cape Fear. So, and that we'll be back on the Robert De Niro train next week with that one.
That guy, man.
He's in Cape Fear.
And everything.
So that, but yeah, I haven't seen either of those movies, so I'm not excited knowing the subject matter of them because I think they're going to be difficult watches, both
Oh
of them.
no.
But
I don't know
am,
anything about either of them. Now
Oh
I'm
yeah,
concerned.
these are very very dark movies.
Oh no.
And Cape Fear I always knew was very dark, and when I read the description of Red Hook Summer, I was like, that's a good match for Cape Fear. So if you can imagine um, why that is, like some people consider Cape Fear like a horror adjacent movie. So yeah, for whatever that's.
We got to get these guys to a party or something, or like
I know more after hours here. Like, is it? I don't even know if Spike Lee
these guys
is
like
making him a puppy.
Yeah.
But it's actually funny because like they're like they're happy guys when you see them.
That
Martin
is true. Yeah,
Scorsese
they
loves just nerding out on cinema, and
maybe
Spike Lee,
that's
I
how
mean,
they're.
he had his whole "Must Be the Shoes" character
Yeah.
and everything, and they're just like Spike Lee's in all those Capital One commercials with Samuel L. Jackson and Charles Barkley.
It's Capital One.
Yeah, that's true.
They look like like so much fun to make.
They
Like,
really do.
Those
they're just,
commercials, like they,
bros
they
having
have a
fun.
blast making those.
Oh yeah. And Martin Scorsese's making TikToks at the Oscars with his daughter. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's just like it's kind of funny. It's just
they're getting the
seem
darkness
like-
out this way, so they can actually.
Now, and to be fair, though, at least with Martin Scorsese, he actually was going through some darkness when he was making some of these movies. This is Scorsese now as an 80-year-old, but in his earlier years, it was a little bit different. But anyway, that'll wrap it up for this week. So Cape Fear and Red Hook Summer next week. If you guys want to follow along and watch with us, we'll be back and we will discuss those two and see if we will break the tie yet again as we go in at the close to midway point here, being 3-3. So thank you all for listening so much. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Until then, thanks for stopping by.